Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, good morning for the colleague joining from the Europe. Bapak Ibu sekalian,
Ladies and gentlemen, today is a kickoff meeting. This is a meeting for project framework of industry net zero transition. This project collaboration between OECD and Bappenas, as well as the Ministry of Industry of Republic of Indonesia. And the representative is the Green Industry Center, represented by Ms. Bhakti. And in this event, there will be a presentation regarding the OECD framework, and it will be delivered by my colleagues. And because today we will discuss about the iron and steel sector, there will be a presentation from the Association of Iron and Steel of Indonesia, and there will be further discussions regarding challenges and priorities and focus areas. To save time, there will be welcoming remarks from German Embassy, Michael, and there's also online speech from OECD, and also opening remarks from Ms. Bhakti from the Green Industry. The time is yours, Michael.
So my name is Michael Lorenz of the German Embassy. I head the Environment and Climate Department there. And yeah, I'm glad to be here today because complex challenges like decarbonization of these hard to abate sectors definitely need synergies. And I think this OECD framework for industry net zero transition that we're kicking off today is a good example of that, because it's part of or overlapping with the OECD Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program, as well as the project CEPA, or for long, Orientation of Infrastructure Investments on the Goals of the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda in Central and Southeast Asia, which is a project of the German International Climate Initiative, through which we realize lots of projects in other countries, most of all in Indonesia. The International Climate Initiative is basically Germany's main contribution to the Paris Agreement and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's been around since 2008 and covers 4 areas: mitigation of climate change, adaptation to climate change, natural carbon sinks, or REDD+, and biodiversity. And Indonesia is in fact the largest or most important EKI beneficiary country. We conduct projects for some 520 million euros, so that's about 8.7 trillion Indonesian rupiah in Indonesia, counting global and regional projects. Regional projects like CEPA make up about 25% of our projects. Then there are bilateral projects, another 25%, and half of our projects are global, carried out in countries all over the world. CEPA, concretely, is active in Indonesia, China, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Philippines, Thailand, and Uzbekistan. And our consortium partners are not only OECD, but also then the Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the United Nations Development Programme, the University of Central Asia, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF. And of course, very importantly, our partner here in Indonesia is the Ministry Bappenas, to whom we're very grateful as well for the good cooperation. CEPA has been carried out for 2 years already, and is going to go on for 2 more years. So we're now in the middle of it. And yeah, that's maybe a good point to take up the things we've already learned and achieved and use them to kick off this decarbonization program aimed specifically at the steel and iron sector. The activities of SEPA in general are to revise or to support Bapinas in the revision of the medium-term national development plan for 2020 to 2024, as well as the long-term strategy aiming at the vision of Indonesia in 2045. Here, especially in response to the pandemic, which came unexpectedly to all of us, there is an opportunity to help direct the investment that now needs to be done towards a more sustainable path, and specifically more sustainable industry. SEPA's activities in Indonesia related to infrastructure planning and evaluation include a pilot multidimensional assessment of a major infrastructure project and a review of strategic infrastructure planning processes, institutions, and instruments to mainstream resilience against climate change risks. Sectoral work of SEPA in Indonesia focuses on fossil fuel subsidy reform. Training programs aimed at unlocking finance for renewable energy projects as a follow-up to the Clean Energy and Finance Review of Indonesia by the OECD. And a regional study on improving low-carbon transport and logistics connectivity, and targeted policy advice on decarbonizing energy-intensive industries. SEPA also includes an area of capacity development activities, including to promote responsible business conduct and due diligence. So SEPA aims for financial institutions also to invest in projects related to energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, and therefore this very close link with the OECD project mentioned at the beginning. In a nutshell, therefore, as part of post-COVID recovery plans, SEPA helps direct investments towards energy, transport, and industry infrastructure projects that not only promote economic growth in the short term, but are also consistent with long-term climate goals. SEPA supports Indonesian partners in creating the enabling conditions that can accelerate the net zero transition. And concretely, SEPA is about sustainable energy, decarbonization of industry, promotion of low-carbon transport, and the reform of the fossil fuel subsidy system. All this corroborates and operationalizes the German support to developing countries in achieving the goals anchored in the Paris Agreement. So I'm glad we're having this kickoff event for the Framework for Industry Net Zero Transition in Indonesia, focused on the iron and steel sector, with you, ladies and gentlemen, and stakeholders really able to pinpoint what is needed to draw the necessary financial flows towards decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. I believe that you would like to jump to other meeting. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next is the opening for our colleague from Paris. Virginie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, clearly.
Good. You can't see me then, I assume. Can you see me as well? Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Bati. Very nice to see you all. I really wish I was with you in the room. It seems to be a very interesting meeting today. So my name is Virginie Marchal. I'm the SEPA project manager sitting in Paris, but overlooking the activities that has just been described by my German colleague. I must say that she did an excellent job in the description. So I had prepared a presentation, but I'm not going to present it. I think she presented really quite clearly what SEPA is about. Maybe just a couple of things I wanted to say. The first one is, why did we design SEPA? And I think I just wanted to remind the participant in the room of the importance of infrastructure and including industry in the context of the climate transition. I mean, we have some figures showing that between 60 and 70% of the emissions of greenhouse gases are embedded in our infrastructure. And also, the infrastructure we build is determining our vulnerability to climate events. So in the context of fast-growing Indonesia, where there's a lot of infrastructure needs and where a lot of investment will have to happen in the next 5 to 10 years to support growth, there's a really important responsibility to you and to all of us to make sure that the investment that will be made will put us on a trajectory that is compatible with a net zero future and with a resilient future. Because the cost of retrofitting in the future will be much higher rather than doing it properly now when we have the opportunity. So there is a responsibility, but there's also an opportunity. As you've been seeing in the past few years, there is a lot of interest in the region from the part of international investors. There are a lot of initiatives that are flourishing around infrastructure. The Global Gateway Initiative from the EU, the Belt and Road Initiative from China, and others from the US as well. So there is a lot of interest in the region, and this represents an opportunity for capital and for investment for the right types of infrastructure. So really what SIPA is about is to make sure this opportunity of new investment coming is really aligned with the objectives of the country first, of your country, which are primarily development objectives, economic development objectives when we think about infrastructure. And in the context of industry, of course, is to provide areas of growth, but also compatible with the low carbon transition and with a just transition, because the social aspect of infrastructure cannot be not looked at in the context of the massive changes that needs to happen. So this is why SIPA took an approach that is looking at the whole infrastructure cycle, from the planning to the financing to the delivery, and is also looking at the different sectors that will have a key footprint when it comes to economy, to social aspects, and to climate. And those sectors are the energy sector, energy efficiency, renewable energy, for instance, the industry sector, and this is the focus of today with a specific discussion on steel, and the transport sector. The energy and transport sector are part of other activities, and I'm really available if some people really want to have more details on that, but I know my colleagues there, Joseph and Bati in the room will also be able to talk about that. So this is really what I wanted to say today. And the objective of this program is to build capacities in the country, is to make sure that at the end of the program, it's not like all the OECD team is going back home and nothing is left. It's really to build capacity so that in the future, all the people attending the events, the capacity building exercise, are just able to use and leverage the tools that are existing and the good practices that are existing in other countries to implement them in the context of Indonesia and in the particular context of the development of the countries for the next 5 to 10 years. So this I think I'm going to stop it for my opening remarks. I really wish you an excellent workshop and an excellent day, and I can't wait to hear the discussion that you will have. So Joseph, the floor is yours, or Bati actually, sorry.
Thank you, Berchini. Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita akan
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will listen to the opening remarks from Ms. Bekti from the Green Industry Center. The time is yours, Ms. Bekti. Thank you so much, Mr. Hakimul. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Peace be upon us all. Thank you so much for your attendance in this meeting, and allow me to read my remarks in Indonesian language. And I'm representing the chair of the Green Industry Center. Mr. Hakimul Bati mentioned that the Ministry of Industry cooperated with the PIH, or the Green Industry Center in collaboration with OECD to achieve net zero transition in the iron and steel sector. So allow me to read the welcoming remarks as well as the opening remarks regarding today's kickoff meeting. Peace be upon us all, the Honorable Ms. Maika Lorenz from the German Embassy, as well as distinguished participants who are willing to attend today's meeting. And of course, I cannot mention your name one by one. Good afternoon. Peace be upon us all. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Greetings of virtue. Shalom. So first of all, we would like to extend our gratitude to our God. Thank you so much that today we are all blessed with health and we can gather today in the kickoff meeting on net zero transition, specifically in the iron and steel sector in Indonesia in this afternoon. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we know, Indonesia has a commitment for climate change. It has been established based on our NDC document, where Indonesia has a target to reduce its GHG emission nationally with independent countermeasure CM2 when there is international support is 43.20%. So Indonesia in the future will have a target to achieve net zero emission by 2060 or sooner. And we, under the Ministry of Industry, early October 11th, 2023, our minister demanded a more ambitious target, namely 2050, to achieve net zero. And of course, it needs to be supported by measures in the manufacturer sector with sustainable program, as well as massive and optimal support from the private sector. And in the manufacturer sector with iron and steel, we see that in the future, in the industrial sector, we have 8 subsectors that will be our concentration. And as conveyed under the NDC and enhanced NDC for 2050. And in this afternoon, we pursue this effort in the iron and steel sector, and in the future, we will expand it to different sectors. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the industrial sector will create positive impact to our economy and also for our employment. And industrial sector has the highest contribution to our GDP, our national GDP, with the largest export in last January until June 2023 in the amount of 71.09% or 91.47 billion US dollar. And on the other side, the industrial sector is one of the highest energy consumers and also contributed to GHG emission that are significant. The iron and steel industry is one of the 8 subsectors that I have mentioned previously as the industry that is energy intensive. And of course, it will contribute to the emission by using fossil fuel from its production processes and also the utilization of products. So industrial process and product use, or IPPU. So we see that the iron and steel subsector will be one of the priorities in the decarbonization program with 7 other sectors. And additionally, during the work meeting, one of the sector will be the transportation vehicle, and we will encourage concentration or focus in 8 or 9 subsectors that will be encouraged for decarbonization. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, decarbonization of the industry, of course, will require financing to achieve green industry, and to achieve decarbonization, we will need costs. And the decarbonization implementation will need investment in the beginning to ensure resources efficiency and also to achieve energy transition and also machine restructurization or new technology that is low energy and also to minimize waste. To reduce the operational cost, specifically for energy bill and utilities, raw materials, and also the management of environment. And hopefully, by reducing the OPEX or the operational costs, there will be room for saving. And by having decarbonization, those room of saving will create cost saving, and it will save production costs so we can have more competitive products. And in the conventional market, it will be more competitive if we can ensure that we will have green market, and this kind of approach will be highlighted in embracing the industrial sector to achieve, because in the beginning we know it as SDG, and now for NDC and the ENDC, we would try to change the old paradigm. To be green is a co-center, and now it becomes affordable and profitable. Ladies and gentlemen, to accelerate industrial decarbonization, we need to have a stronger collaboration internationally and also with the external parties. The government of Indonesia is very active in international events such as the presidency of G20 in 2022 and also the chairmanship of Indonesia in ASEAN in 2023. And in this opportunity, through the Framework for Sustainable Infrastructure for Program in Asia, or SIPA, between Bappenas and OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, collectively, we will develop solutions for the acceleration of industrial decarbonization in the industrial sector. And we will build lots of policy solutions specifically for financing of decarbonization in the iron and steel sector. In this kickoff meeting, we will have further discussions and we will map those challenges specifically for the iron and steel industries, and also what will be the required supports to support the industry to achieve decarbonization. Hopefully, we will gain policy recommendation that will be implementable and it will be suited with the Indonesian condition. And ladies and gentlemen, industrial decarbonization is a challenge and also opportunities that we need to tackle together. We sincerely hope that this event will accelerate the Indonesia's industrial sector that will be more competitive as well. Thank you so much. Peace be upon us all. Om Santi Santi Om, the head of the Green Industry Center. That's all, Mr. Hakimu and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. That was the remark from the head of the Green Industry Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bekti, for your welcoming remarks. The key word is to be green doesn't have to be cost center. So is it true? It can be like that. We will see the result of the project in the next 18 months. Next will be the presentation from the framework itself. What is the framework for net zero transition? Dare and Joseph, over to you.
Thank you very much, Abati. So I am Joseph Cordonnier. I work at the OECD in the Environment Directorate. And in this presentation, we will present a bit more in detail these projects on decarbonizing the steel sector in Indonesia and what we aim to do in the next year and a half. Maybe just staying on the title slide. So all this work, country-driven, is based on a framework that we have developed and released on our website in 2022 that is available in English and also in Bahasa, that proposes a methodology in order to assist emerging economies in decarbonizing certain sectors of their industry. So also for today's meeting, so the purpose is to introduce this OECD framework and hope that also in the next 18 months we have the opportunity to meet again. And after this presentation, we will also have a presentation from the Steel Association, and then discussions around the key challenges for the decarbonization of the steel sector in Indonesia, and discussion about potential focus areas for this particular framework. So we also count on your active participation in the second half of the meeting. So the starting point for us at the OECD to develop this framework was also to acknowledge the complexity of decarbonizing industry. So this encompasses multiple subsectors, multiple processes, multiple technologies. So there is no silver bullets to decarbonize the industry. And even considering one sector in particular, there is some heterogeneity in the decarbonization pathways that we need to recognize based on the existing assets of a country, based on trade relations, based on infrastructure status, supply chain, etc. So this framework is actually a very flexible approach where the purpose is to develop tailored solutions that are also applicable and suitable for a given country and a given sector. We aim for two main outputs for this. So the framework is not a technical framework or technology-based framework, but focuses rather on first improving enabling conditions. And by enabling conditions, we mean policies, regulations, market-based instruments, etc. And a second pillar is to work on financing instruments. So if there is a proper investment conditions in a country, then we may still need some tools beyond conventional financing in order to help decarbonization projects to be competitive with conventional ones. And in the case of Indonesia, we also aim for strategic alignment with the national plans and policies, which were also presented in opening remarks by the Kemenperin, including the National Medium-Term Development Plan, knowing as well that this work aims to contribute to the one that will be released for the next 5 years, the nationally determined contributions, and net zero emission 2060 analysis and pathways. So to implement this framework, we work with three main categories of actors. So policymakers, which are the natural counterparts as the OECD as an intergovernmental organization. But we also involve from the outset industry actors and finance institutions. And this work has three main pillars. So the first one is selecting a focus area. And by focus area, we mean for a given sector, a sublist of projects or technologies that will support decarbonization or contribute to decarbonization of this sector, and that may struggle to attract financing or to be competitive today. So we will not work on comprehensive roadmap for a given sector, but rather at targeted project level solutions. The second one is the outcome of implementation. So based on the recommendation that we'll make on enabling conditions and financing solutions, the purpose is that it contributes to developing a pipeline of bankable projects for decarbonization. And lastly, the framework benefits. So at the end of this 18 months process, we will release a traditional OECD report, but beyond that, we also want to extend this work to further dissemination activities, capacity building activities, as was also highlighted by our colleague Virginie in her opening remarks. So now if we go a bit more in detail in the methodology that has been developed in this framework. So the first pillar on the focus area definitions has 2 steps. The first one is stakeholder engagement. So we had a first meeting in December last year to introduce a bit the framework. But now we are moving forward, and we have actually formed a steering committee together with several line ministries. So the steering committee is chaired by Kemen Perin, with strong involvement also of BAPENAS, Ministry of Energy, and other line ministries. Industry associations are also part of the steering committee, and OJK also representing finance institutions. And the first decisions of this project steering committee to select textile sector and iron and steel sector, so we have the kickoff today for iron and steel sector, is informed by background research that we have been carried out over the last year. Today's meeting aims to fine-tune this and to say within the iron and steel sector, what would be the particular point of attention and contributor to decarbonizations in Indonesia. And this will be the end of this first pillar on focus area selection. Then we will enter in a more analytical part of the framework, where we at the OECD will also lead the analysis on economic assessment and business cases of the selected decarbonization technologies, and match them with market solutions, policies, financing instruments that can help improve their economic viability. So this 2-step, 3 and 4, will be supported by a range of workshops. So we target to have more or less quarterly meetings to discuss also the results of this analysis. And at the end of next year, following publication of a country report, the purpose is to define as well how to further disseminate the findings, which actors can take forward the recommendations to actually implement them in projects or in channeling financing towards decarbonization. So on top of the steering committee, which I described earlier, we will form a technical advisory committee to support us in this analysis that will comprise of 20 or 30 active members of decarbonization in the country, to which we will submit our work step by step. So targeting every 3 months, new inputs for review, comments, and insights. And we aim to have this both on steel and textile sectors, and with an alternance of virtual meeting and in-person meetings in Indonesia. And all these findings will be then disseminated to an extended stakeholder list. So the reports of the OECD are publicly available, and the goal is that all the findings will be also made public and shared both in the countries, but also in other countries where we implement similar programs. So I will skip a bit the first part of the framework and present a bit what we mean by focus area. So this work aims to contribute to decarbonization of sectors, but industry sectors can be quite complex and have complex value chains, long value chains. Here we highlight, I think this is a bit difficult to read, I'm sorry for that, but a lot of activities along the iron and steel value chain. So that includes mining of raw materials, production of inputs such as electricity, hydrogen, or any form of energy or reductants for the production. All the iron and steel making activities, so including the existing technologies, coke plants, sinter plants, blast furnaces, electric arc furnaces, etc., but also potential future technologies and future assets. And in addition, a lot of downstream processes or valorization of byproducts. So this also includes, for instance, in the breakthrough technologies, the carbon capture and storage. One of the questions for today, or for the implementation of this framework in general, is to identify among all these technologies, among existing assets and new assets, what would be 3 to 5 key projects, key technologies that should be investigated further and for which we should carry out economic assessments to then analyze based on the viability gap with conventional technologies, what can be done in order to bring them to improve their competitiveness. So the way we will do this, I will do that very quickly, but first we will rely on existing scenarios. So if there exist scenarios at sectoral level, at country level, this is the ideal case. But if this is not the case, we can also rely on academic paper, global benchmarks, and try to tailor them. But we won't do ourselves a whole decarbonization pathway. We will rely on what already exists. Based on this, we will also identify, together with you, together with the Technical Advisory Committee, this list of 3 to 5 key technologies that we could analyze, and then carry out economic assessments that are fitted or adjusted to Indonesian case. So for instance, energy prices, resource availability, etc., should all benefit from your insights on the specific case of Indonesia situation. Once we have submitted these economic assessments, which can be on production costs, they can also show carbon mitigation or estimated carbon mitigation results of each technologies and further economic indicators. The purpose is to develop all these solutions that could be implemented. So either on the policy side or on the financial side. And most likely, there will be a combination of the two of them that will be required in order to bring decarbonization projects at par with conventional investments. And what we will do in this step is to select these instruments and try to measure their impacts on the business cases that we will have done in the previous step to confirm what could be the most efficient measures in order to accelerate or to scale up the decarbonization. So this slide is the last one. We won't go in all details. This is just to highlight that the purpose of this process is not to have a 1.5 year study with a single report at the end, but to have regular inputs and to provide regular updates. And so every 3 to 6 months, we will also provide additional material, preliminary results that we'll be very happy also to send for review and comments to the Technical Advisory Committee, Project Steering Committee, and to discuss in further workshops. So I will stop here for this part, and I will let my colleague Patty continue.
Thank you, Joseph. Derek, do you want to add more? No. Next is the presentation on the steel sector in Indonesia. After that, maybe we will discuss. Pak Yeri, monggo Pak, silahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Bekti. Ms. Berti, thank you for the opportunity to the Association of Iron and Steel. We are going to talk about the situation of the industry towards the decarbonization. So we are still approximating decarbonization as cost incurring, but Ms. Bekti was saying that this is actually can be a profit center. So if we can talk about it in a wholesome manner, then it can be a profit center. As you know, global warming has created social and economic impact. If you see from the picture, it can cause drought, fire, pollution, flooding, and drought. These are the things that we have to pay attention to, and we have to calculate as a high cost in the future. So we from the industry, as one of the actors to realize decarbonization, would like to contribute. As you can see, we have seen there is a Paris Agreement, how decarbonization in industry can be implemented. So from this document, various developed nations have developed carbon neutral policies. But it has to also calculate the economic impacts. If we see the increased temperature of the Earth, so that we don't exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we need extra effort to lower the carbon emission 30 by 32 gigatons of carbon dioxide. So this is our challenge. So this emission decrease can be done in the industries of agriculture, in the use of land, and various efforts have been done in order to achieve this emission target so that we don't have an increased temperature of exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius. So if we see from this table, if we want to achieve less than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, then we have to do efforts. Compared to the current condition here, this is us now, we have to decrease 32 gigatons of carbon dioxide. These are the things that we can do. This is already mentioned before. We can reserve energy through renewable energy and also through reboisation, etc. So we actually produce this 73.2% from industrial activities. So for the emission itself, 24%. The emission from the iron and steel is 7.2%. Based on this emission gap report in 2009, the emission is 11.5 gigatons of carbon. If you see 11.5 comprises of what? If you see the industry, that's glass, plastic, and rubber is 1.4 gigaton of carbon dioxide. The highest one here is steel, 3.7. This is the highest. This is not too clear in this picture, but it's 3.7. So steel is one of the highest contributors. If you see from the sector, the highest sector is in construction, from 11.5, 5 gigatons is from the construction. So the challenges for the iron and steel industry at national level, if you see from the per capita consumption of steel, in 2022, we reached 60.1 kilogram per capita. Our neighboring countries is already above 200, 270 in Thailand, 230 in Vietnam. If you see, we are only a quarter If we want to close this gap, then we have to increase our consumption by fourfold. This is challenging because we need to develop new capacity that we need to design from now on so that we can also avoid incurring more emission. So we need to have green technology so that the government target that 2050 the net zero will be achieved. If you see the increase of the needs of steel, it's always increasing. So we're already reaching 2 or 3 times of 2015 by 2100. So we need to utilize the increased need for steel consumption. But in this increase, we really need to see there needs to be a technology, because every technology will have an impact to the intensity of carbon dioxide emission in producing steel. The best one is actually AF. It's only 0.1, the intensity tons per carbon dioxide per tons of steel. So if our government wants to target that net zero is by 2050, and we are still increasing the capacity, then the government has to direct the technology to this technology. If you see the steel industry from the beginning to end, starting from the beginning, there is steel making, iron ore making, steel making, and rolling. The one that consume energy most is the iron ore making, and cinder making. These are the areas that we have to pay attention to so that the government's target for 2050 can be achieved. Some of the examples for technological advancement, this is the carbon direct avoidance. So we try to find technology with carbon dioxide output that is minor. So without direct carbon emission release. So carbon direct avoidance is going to be hydrogen based or electricity based, and the electricity should be sourced from renewable energy. So it shouldn't be electricity that is oil based, but it should be from renewable sources. This is one of the technologies, carbon direct avoidance. And then also we have to improve the process. We can't avoid that there is going to be carbon dioxide emission, but with hydrogenization process, we can capture the carbon and we can use this as, reuse it as fuel. So that's going to supplement the fossil fuel, etc. So this is going to be like a recycle of the gas. So we use it to increase our internal energy consumption. Next, carbon capture storage. So we capture the carbon and then we use it for the production. So we capture it for use. So no, it's not released. So this is also something that we can do. If you see this from various technologies, we can see that first, the problem is the availability of the industry, of the technology, and the preparation of developing such technology. And for cost, there are three costs: the R&D cost, the CapEx, and OpEx. So we can see the CapEx of so for the carbon capture from the technology availability is pretty significant and public acceptance is small because this new technology will create air pollution. But with the other technology, we can see from the various variables in terms of financing and the availability of technology, we can choose the best. Of course, we have to choose the ones that are most available. The R&D development is time is short term, so maybe we can choose something like that. The highest one, this is long term. This is something that we need to prepare for in terms of R&D. What is this? So perhaps this is something that this is the end of my presentation. Our expectation is that we can align our capacity with our neighboring countries. Now there's already 280 and we're still 120. If we want to close the gap, we need to increase the capacity and we have to push for more consumption. But we need new technology that can achieve the government's target for decarbonization. So there are some technologies options on how it can be with carbon direct avoidance. That's something good. And then we can also do the cost center. So this is something that has to be considered by the government. And to catch up with the net carbon zero target in 2050, indeed, the current facilities need to be improved so that we can support the decarbonization program by pushing actors in order to increase the capacity to do carbon capturing or to reuse the captured carbon. This is something that should be resolved through communication between the government and industry so that there are going to be programs of the government that can support to that end. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. God's peace be upon you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeri. That was a very good presentation.
We are come to the discussion session, and the discussion is about the challenges. So you can comment, you can also give the question to the speaker. But now the discussion is not solution first, but about the challenges. Mungkin Pak Yeri,
perhaps Mr. Yeri, let me start from a very simple question regarding challenges. When we're talking about challenges, initially we will talk about data, projection, etc. The projection for iron and steel in Indonesia, not only in your company, but also the entire sector. Is it clear or it's still gray area? And what are your future plan? What is the iron and steel conditions? And what is the progress until 2050?
Jadi nanti akan dibantu nih termasuk anggota
My team will also
bagaimana pengembangan industri
answer the question regarding the industry's progress for the future. Regarding data, data is going to be utilized for projection, but the data that we have so far is quite sufficient. Yet it's still in the global level, and we can state that our consumption is still 60 kg per capita, and we need to quadruple it. And yes, please. If I may add regarding data, from our association, we already have our own projection. We have our annual real data. I think the latest one is 2022 because 2023 has not ended, but we do have projection until 2050. Based on data, it will continuously increasing, and it is also a challenge for us. If we want to increase the steel consumption in the national level, and we are also facing net zero emission challenge in 2050. And it was also mentioned that iron and steel industry has generated high emission. So that's the challenge. Thank you, Mr. Dudit. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, do you have comment, question? So not only about the sector, but also about the framework. Please mention your name. I'm Joko Purwanto from Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the presentation from the Association of Iron and Steel Industry. And we see that the iron and steel industry in Indonesia would like to achieve net zero, and we are relying on indirect reduced iron. So those project is using blast furnace and also BOF, basic oxygen furnace, whereas the global growth or progress, we have another procedure, namely electric arc furnace. And if you would like to see the short-term process, not only steel making, but the iron making, we need to combine it with direct reduced iron, DRI, and EAF, so plus electric arc furnace. But my question would be, based on my own study, the electric arc furnace in Indonesia, the number of them has decreased for the last 5-10 years. And in Southeast Asia, those who produce the DRI is only Indonesia and Malaysia. Indonesia is Meratus LLC. They used to produce it, but now they no longer produce them. So the tendency is that Indonesia is avoiding DRI EIF and heading to indirect reduced iron, where with the indirect reduced iron, we need CCUS. That's the pathway. But we still make a consideration about that. So the question is why DRI is decreasing, even though it is a pathway that is most promising for decarbonization in the iron and steel sector. By seeing the last 5-10 years progress. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your question. Indonesia is not heading to DRI and also EAF. So if you see the development cost, capital expenditure, etc., and also the investment cost from DRI and EAF, based on data, will require a lot of investment. And that's why from steel companies, Indonesia is not heading to that direction because it will require high investment costs. And based on this program, I think their assistants can make a study about the best technology and also the gradual stage from 2020 until 2050 and what will be the most probable optimal technology so we can head to net zero emission because we need to ensure the cost analysis, investment analysis. We cannot spontaneously replace the technology without predicting if we use certain technology, will we have high profit or high cost? We need further analysis. And I think there are lots of variables. That's from me, sir. If we observe Krakatau Steel LLC, we apply DRI and EAF, and we're not leaving them behind, but we found out that it's gas-based, whereas based on our quantity supply and also the quality of supply, it is still decreasing, even though the cost has been exorbitant. Indonesia, in the past, it's only $1. Now it has achieved $6. So whether we want it or not, we shifted to BOF, but we combine it with the other EAF while waiting if we have sufficient gas supply, and then we can revitalize the DRI. So the direct supply from Cirebon, it was in the past because now it has been tapped by others. And we need consistent policy by the government, and we need to ensure that the technology that we procure will secure the saving for energy. And we understand this is a huge homework. How can we take our action in a persistent manner? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Iya, mungkin perkenalkan saya Arif dari tim WRI World Resources Institute.
I am Arif from World Resource Institute for Sustainable Business. And to continue, Mr. Joko, regarding a very interesting insights regarding the technology mapping. If you see the previous discussion, we see that abatement option for steel is quite tricky because its energy use will heavily in scope 1 emission and the proportion for heat is very high. So we only have several players applying electronic arc furnace such as Gunung Raja Paksi. So I think that was a very interesting insight. We found out that the technology that seems to be low-hanging fruit such as DRI or AF is still limited contextualization in Indonesia. So I think this will be very interesting for us to explore further to do technology mapping specifically for the steel and iron sector in Indonesia, the abatement option in terms of low carbon technology that most suitable. And I also would like to comment on the framework that has been presented by CEFIM OECD. If the technology option has been mapped, and we can also explore further about marginal abatement, marginal cost. So we can see which one that will be feasible, how much is the investment cost, and what is the impact for reduction. Is it worthy enough to be prioritized? And I think we can collaborate together for that. Thank you so much. I agree, sir. We need to see the entire ecosystem. There are several options. It's a certain technology that has been selected, but how about the consideration of local needs and also raw materials? And when we're talking about BRI and EAF, we did some consideration. Pertamina's supply go direct to Cilegon, but because there is also other chemical industry, ceramic industry, that's why our supply is decreasing. That's why if there is government support for gas supply is sufficient, it will be good. But now I don't think it's really optimal. So we all agree we need to do some mapping, right, ma'am? And we need to seek the most optimal ecosystem. If we see the current technology, EAF and also BRI is better, but is it supported by the ecosystem? And on another regard, when we're talking about capacity, what we need to evaluate to reduce the emission. It will not be a new investment, but there might be a recondition if they don't have certain tool to capture the gas. I think we can select some methods. We have Chinese technology. So the carbon capture or carbon sinking that they can do by using certain technology, and hopefully it can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there another question in the room? Okay.
Maybe this was a very important point which you made about the MAC, the marginal abatement costs of technologies. Obviously, we are discussing today decarbonization, and that's the starting point of all the work, also where the OECD framework looks at. But there are a number of other KPIs, indicators we need to be mindful about, we think. That's why when my colleague Joseph was presenting the framework, and from this discussion also, what will be the implications of the technologies? Let's say with respect to raw materials. What does it mean for scrap? That's a big issue, as we know. Not only, in Asia, globally, many countries are being impacted by that. It's also an issue about the locations of the future steel plants in terms of access to resources, availability of resources for investing in new technologies. So I'm putting this on the table for discussion, and maybe other colleagues could also comment, experts can also comment. What other indicators, what other issues we should be thinking, considering about when it comes to the steel industry decarbonization? Maybe this is something we can also try to reflect on.
Maybe also an additional point to what Dea just mentioned. As you also rightly said, there are some low-hanging fruits, and this includes as well the existing asset base. So from our analysis, we also noticed that the capacity ratio or use of EAF in Indonesia was quite low. So we were also wondering what could be done to improve existing assets. So for instance, for EAF, is it an issue of scrap availability? Is it an issue of electricity supply? Is it an issue of operational performance? So what could help increase these low-hanging fruits solutions? And maybe also related to this and what they mentioned, in the existing assets, including blast furnaces, for instance, what would be the criteria or the best position sites in order to implement these technologies. So for instance, for carbon capture and storage, are there sufficient infrastructure in order to store the capture CO2?
Oke, mungkin yang dibahas
Perhaps what Joseph has stated was also correct. There are several constraints based on data of electric arc furnace in Indonesia is relatively low. And one of the issues is about the low scrap supply. So that is one of many variables why electric arc furnace in Indonesia is relatively low. And there are other variables that we need to talk and discuss together and for us to seek the best solution to determine the most suitable technology if we want to target it in Indonesia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayu. I'm from Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or areas, and with Pak Joko. I would like to touch upon point 3 and 4, because those questions asking about financing and also sufficient support for decarbonizing iron and steelmaking assets. So I would like to zoom in and also zoom out, talking about carbon pricings and also CBAM. Because in Indonesia, for instance, we already have carbon tax applicable last year, but the carbon trading itself, also applicable in other Asian countries, is still not, we don't have explicit carbon trading, but there are a lot of strategies and initiatives that are trying to kind of navigate the way to how to say, to implement trading in carbon, but there's no explicit market. So I was just wondering how, in what way and to what extent the framework that we are talking about today can provide countervailing effects to the carbon pricing and also the effect of CBAM, how these two mechanisms, these measures can help attract financings, and also additional financing can also come from recycling the revenue from the carbon pricing that if we apply this to decarbonize iron and steelmaking assets, and how this framework also can facilitate this process of decarbonizing in assets to be more progressive, I would say. That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. So, as mentioned, the framework considers local assets mainly, but of course still as a widely traded commodity. I believe around 20% of the production is globally traded. So the question is as well, what will drive investment in decarbonization technologies? And carbon price is, of course, a driver because it can bring at par the decarbonization projects with conventional technologies. For the specific case of CBAM, the framework will not analyze specifically what it is, but what matters is that it impacts the global dynamic. Maybe Indonesia exports today to Europe remains limited and will be less affected by CBAM. But if another country, for instance, if China exports less steel to Europe due to CBAM, there will be repercussions, maybe oversupply in the region and therefore indirect impact as well. The way with the framework we can also consider this challenge is, I would say, twofold. The first one is considering, as the colleagues from Steel Association mentioned, the Indonesian context, where today Indonesia imports a large quantity of steel, and then analyze how these projects or all the pathways consider development of domestic production for domestic use and development of domestic productions potentially for exports as well. Because these two markets may also have different dynamics. And when we do the economic assessment of projects, this may, of course, have an impact. The second way we can also look at it is when we do economic assessments, is to include this kind of criteria such as carbon pricing or shadow carbon pricing to see what is the level that brings costs at par. And this is quite close to the comment that was made earlier by Dea and by a colleague from WRI, in order to understand what could be the level that actually changes decisions for investors. This is, for instance, something we have seen in Europe, where the first plants that rely on hydrogen-based DRI have actually managed to raise funds, also from capital markets, private financing, because of the impact of carbon pricing and the projections that they were seeing. So this shows as well how the changes of enabling conditions, policies, regulations can influence as well the financing instruments, financing structures for decarbonization projects.
Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita masih di sesi tantangan.
So we're still in the challenges session. Usually it's very easy for us to discuss about challenges. We keep on complaining and we're good at that. And because the gentleman from the Steel Association knows about it better. So you think, how about our regulation? Do you think it is sufficient? Is our regulation sufficient for decarbonization? And from the player's perspective, what is the likenesses of the regulation and what part of the regulation that needs to be improved? And I think this is also an input to the Ministry of Industry. And I also would like to comment on regulation implementation that is not easy. We need to see it as a whole. I'd like to invite the association comment, and also I'd like to invite responses from the Ministry of Industry. Yes, please. If we see the current industrial challenges, we want industry to grow and develop, and we need to maintain competitiveness. Second point, industry would also like to have the fair business climate. So those two factors to improve competitiveness, and second, to guarantee that we have fair competition in the market. We see that now the government is very supportive in our competitiveness. We see that the cost of energy is also being reduced. And one of the challenge in our industry is competition. It's no longer B2B, but it's now G2G competition. So in this regard, with China, the government of China is competing with the government of Indonesia, but because China is more flexible, all the case of steel, China can always change their policy so they can make us doing import to Indonesia. They can offer tax rebate. So there's also mechanism for remedy such as anti-dumping. But the issue to win the anti-dumping, it will take years for us. So if we talk about decarbonization, there are two factors. The first, new investment. New investment, we would like to achieve the golden Indonesia year 2045. And if we see our capacity and compare it with our neighboring countries, we need to improve it. So extra 60 million ton to be generated until in 2050. And we need to develop a certain mapping of the most suitable technology in Indonesia. And when it is suitable, we need to be consistent and persistent in running the program. We don't want in the middle of the road, we will stop that effort. For example, Krakatau Steel was guaranteed by Pertamina to be supplied with a certain quality and quantity of gas production. But by the middle of the journey or the progress, the supply stopped. So the good one, EAF, and also hydrogen-based energy, those are good technology. But do we have the supply? Do we have the ecosystem? And because this is a long-term program, we need to have long-term policy as well. So no matter what, when we talk about progress, it should aid our competitiveness. So the industry needs to improve their competitiveness, but it needs to be protected from unfair trade that is actually being tailored by the developed countries. For example, industrial for steel is already overcapacity in the developed country. So they want to export it to other countries as well. But if we're not developing our capacity, one day we will be very reliant to other countries because the indicator of developed country is by seeing their steel capacity, for example. That's all from me. Thank you.
So basically the emphasis is on competitiveness.
Terima kasih Pak Hakimul,
Thank you,
Pak
Mr. Hakim.
Jeffrey ya.
And thank you, Mr. Jeffrey.
Mungkin saya di sini berbicara dalam
I
industri hijau Pak
am
Hakimul.
talking from the perspective of the
Banyak
Green Industry Center.
yang nanti
So there will be other directorates that
tentunya
perhaps
dari sisi regulasi seperti
can talk about the regulatory framework. So I would talk about only about the Green Industry Center. The same, it is a challenge for us, Mr. Hakimo, related to the decarbonization. Indeed, it has been a long time that there are many parties who have expressed that the obligation to reduce emission is more for the IPPU sector. But when we see the matrices, we are also requested to reduce from 3 sectors, so energy, and also IPPU, and also waste. So this is also bearing impact to the budget, may it be from us, from the state budget, and the international budget. And in the future, when our target is increased, so I heard that there's going to be an increased target, and this would require more significant investment. And with number one challenge, with the first challenge, this will also bear impact to the required increased sustainable investment. And thirdly, when we are asked to shift to the renewable energy, Indeed, we need renewable energy, which material is also sustainable and it wouldn't be too significant. So there has to be consideration made when we shift to renewable energy, because the renewable energy, the centers will be outside of Java. So when we have to be renewable energy based, then we will get into a scramble. So we need to pay attention to the posts available. And related to decarbonization plan in our sector, indeed, our position is the same. Some have been so progressed, maybe I can tell you, amongst the 8 sectors, some independently or being supported by the government have exponentially grown some sectors. In the glasshouse emission report, you can also see that the condition of each sector. So we are trying to explore that. So why do we work with iron and steel now? We also will try to also work with the others, all of the 8 sectors. In the morning, in the presentation of Mr. Stephen, Joseph, right? There are 3, right? From the government, and there's industrial sectors. And then, so there are 3 parties that have to work together to achieve goodness. So this is the time for us to find solution. How to solve these challenges for the iron and steel sector, and OECD will give the advice also on how to overcome this. And from the Ministry of Industry, we also try to formalize standardization for steel industry. So we are formulating, well, we used to not to be too, the people used to not to be too interested on this. We tried to ask people in 2016, 2017 to develop a standard, and Mr. Jenny said, oh, I'm not interested yet. Everybody else was interested though. So perhaps now people feel the need, and I feel that you might even exceed other sectors. Every year, steel sector ask for their standard for their industry, because there are a lot of items to be covered, right? So we have issued the standard for layered steel, and also for steel sheets. So this is more for your sector to work towards efficiency and to do conservation management, because within it, there are many collectives that have been pushing for a more efficient process. So we, from the Green Industry Center, have that perspective. And to respond to the other points, yes, ma'am, we have been asked by the Trade Ministry, because iron and steel does export, even though small, right? Even though it's still small scale right now, but We also push for, as already mentioned by the gentleman over there, that maybe we can utilize because the government of Indonesia is trying to formulate a legal umbrella for the CCS. And it's not only for the oil and gas that can utilize CCS, but we are also pushing for the other industrial sectors. From us, from the industry side, of course, carbon dioxide can be utilized. So we are trying to push for how, with the presidential decree that we are formulating, because CCS can be used from the other by the other industries, by iron, etc. Of course, we are pushing for a legal umbrella then can accommodate CCUS. And also, there are some industries who are expressing interest for the CCS. So we are not abandoning sectors that are expected by Mr. Minister and the others to move towards decarbonization. Aside from that, the gentleman from the association, Mr. Jibri, we have invited people to trainings. So for iron and steel members, we have given training for how to calculate glasshouse emissions. So we actually did capacity building for the iron and steel business actors. And there were reports that iron and steel business actors have not submitted their data, but now they actually do. So this can show us the real condition of your industry. So in the future, we also receive, we actually accept your expression that how to make sure that there is a certification for your industry, how to fulfill the standardization. And we do actually provide assistance. This is our center's policy so that we can move forwards together for decarbonization. So that's what I can present, Mr. Hakimu. So we need budget because we are targeted not only to IPU, but also in energy and waste. And as already mentioned by Mr. Yosef, if there is an industry that is successful to reduce emission, then they're going to get funding. So the challenge from the minister is how industries who want to commit towards green industry, of course, they need to have access to assistance so that they will be willing to move towards green energy. So it is not only those who have attained the status of green industry, because sustainable funding, I feel, when they can reduce emission, then they get assistance. But how? To make available assistance to industries that have commitment to move towards green industry. And for low-cost initiatives such as managerial processes or conservation in with low cost or no cost approaches. So we do trainings on these matters. So this is what we do for a number of industrial sectors, not only iron and steel. So I think this is from me. Thank you, Mr. Hakimo.
Thank you very much. I also have a question very related to the intervention on the financing side. So you presented a range of technologies that are well identified actually to achieve or to help decarbonize through direct reduction, electric arc furnaces, carbon capture and storage. And I had two questions actually. The first one is, when a steel company in Indonesia wants to implement these technologies today, first, are the technologies available? Meaning the technology providers, are they active in the country? Are they able to provide technical assistance, work on the feasibility, technical studies, etc., relatively fast? And the second one is, what is the current state of financing? Is it mostly private financing, so relying fully on very profitable business cases and companies' own funds? Or are there already some other sources of financing that can help steel companies to decarbonize?
Sebenarnya dalam hal ini kita asosiasi nggak bisa menjawab.
Actually, as association, we cannot answer that because that's actually at the discretion of each company, whether they have the funding and they have the relation with the technological supplier. So I don't have the data offhand. Perhaps there are other colleagues who have the experience, whether decarbonization in the iron and steel sector, whether the funding is from self-funding, private funding, or some of you, in some cases, actually get funding from the third party, for example.
Maybe just to simplify the question, is there sufficient public finance available in the overall industry sector for de-risking? So reducing risks for decarbonization. That's one question. And the second question, from your knowledge, is there sufficient private capital, so companies themselves investing in decarbonization, or are they facing barriers? Any views on this? It is important because the solutions that will be developed by the OEC jointly with the Ministry of Industry and other actors, the steel industry, will need to overcome these barriers. So any insights will be very helpful.
Yes, WRI again here. I would argue that it's not really about the availability of the capital, but how to make the project itself to be bankable in the eye of the finance. That's what I would like to argue. The reason is so we are quite we have several two main flagships actually. So we have a CIA, a Clean Energy Investment Accelerator, and also the Net Zero Hub, where is the companies are joining the initiative. So we are quite familiar with the demand perspective from the industry itself. And from what we gather, at least a lot of them feel like that when it comes to the decarbonization and the projects on the decarbonizations, it seems it's very, very challenging to make the project to be bankable. And it seems that there is a gap on the link itself between the availability or capital that needs to be accessed with the project itself. So I think I would like to argue that maybe we should focus on really identifying the bankable criteria, and if that's also the barriers, how to make such a project to be bankable. My suspect is maybe because this kind of projects will brings the rate of returns in a very long terms that might not be lucrative to some finance institutions.
I'm Raffi from WWF Indonesia. If I may add from Mas Arif's statement, I think Mas Arif stay from the company side, but I think I'm from the more on the FI side. Most of the FI, especially talking in Indonesia, haven't fully comprehend what companies need to decarbonize their operation, and sometimes there's gap, knowledge gap between the, for instance, the relationship manager or with the sustainability team and with the commercial that provide loans or funds to the companies, and that's some knowledge gap. Moreover, with the complexity with the industry itself and the technicality and the granularities that entail with different subsector. Yeah, for instance, in the steel, iron and steel itself, there's a lot of technical terms that relationship manager doesn't really understand, and how to what they can do to address these challenges. And maybe if it's on the supply side, is that the importance to engage not only the RM, the relationship manager, but also to give them the suitable knowledge and on how to support the needed by the to make and to know what is needed from the company side. So yeah, not only from the company itself to make it bankable, but on the FI side, there's still some gap to be addressed. Thank you.
Any other views?
Thank you. Pertanyaan ini akan saya tunjukkan kepada EEC ya.
I'm posing this question to EEC. You said that some financial institutions are experiencing the decreased use of EIF, and then some industries are trying to develop the use of biofuel. Since which year does this start? BioF was 2010, but not only BioF, it's combined with IAF. That was done by Krakatau Steel. But actually, technology-wise, we prefer DRI and DAF. That's why EIF is still maintained. So BioF was combined with the EIF, and this technology is available in various states. But IIF cannot be done because of competitiveness. So some small miles that get into the here with simple technology, but because there is no standards, then we feel that we cannot compete with them, like induction furnace. This is actually banned in China, but we still use it in Indonesia. So this causes competitiveness in the Indonesia. So they would rather buy the billet rather than implementing the DAF. And then also the price of scrap has been going up and down. So if the ecosystem is supporting this, then we of course would like to maintain the existing AIF. So that's the challenge. So we have the capacity for EAF.
Ya, sebelumnya mohon maaf.
With apologies, I'm Abdian Hilmi from the Institute for Essential Services Reform.
Mungkin pertanyaan lanjutan.
So just to continue the question
Penggunaan
related to direct reduction iron, you used natural gas before.
Sebuah studi atau
Is there any study or plan to replace that with hydrogen? Not yet. Because like this, it's what we have is not active anymore since 2005. Actually. So it's too old. So we were depending on natural gas, but because it was not available, so we demolished one and we still maintain the other, but we cannot have the enough resources for it. But for hydrogen, we don't have it yet because I don't even know whether this can be used in the existing area or not.
Maybe also on the use of hydrogen, for instance, in DR plants. There is also, we say, nascent international experience or number of international projects that are just starting. So currently, the most advanced plants using this technology is actually still at pilot scale, but there are several large-scale plants being built at the moment, notably in Germany and Sweden. It is also worth noting that currently the DR plants actually use already quite a high number of or high volume of hydrogen, because as they use natural gas, they actually convert it into hydrogen up to 70% and carbon monoxide. So this is a bit technical, but just to say it's already possible to use a share of hydrogen. The challenge is to use 100% green hydrogen. I think we have also overcome a bit time by 15 minutes for the coffee break. So what I would propose is that we take now a 15 minutes break and reconvene at 3:30, where we will discuss which area can the framework focus on. So thanks a lot for the participation and looking forward to discuss in 15 minutes.
Silakan Bapak Ibu, kopi sudah di.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, you have coffees to access outside this room.
Yes, Ernest.
Ya, seperti itu.
Berapa orang banyak karena punya banyak orang.
Ya, 50-an orang. Iya. Ini juga ada proyek dekarbonisasi industri juga. Bahasnya 5 subsektor. Ini salah satunya. Salah satunya model, tapi kami kerjasama sama Lawrence Berkeley National Lab yang mengerjakan modelnya mereka. Kalau kami engagement ke stakeholder. Ini kami undang LGD, terus ikut seperti ini kan, jadi kasih tahu. Terus kadang kami berkirim surat juga ke stakeholder kayak Kementerian SDM, Kementerian Industrian, wawancara juga melakukan. Challenge sendiri sih Pak, terkait pengumpulan data sebenarnya.
Nanti aku kirim link untuk rekaman ini. Bapak nggak butuh rekaman. Udah tuh saya kirim.
So far, good. Maybe all of the but still waiting for the
I told you if she needs anything, she can always call us. But more Patterson, also the other two really, this girl was looking, or Jika girl was looking. Yeah, I told her like if she needs anything for Patterson, before they come, they can contact us. So yeah. I also cannot recognize I know it, but like. You think of me or? YouTube channel. Yes. I don't have. And this will send this as you he just apologize because we're not continue. We just coming down. Yeah, of course. Then, oh my God. I see that. Just for just I mean for the luggage to not just to for the so nice. So kind. So kind. But what we do is we share. Two for you, one for you. Don't consider. Yeah. Two for you, one. No. I can buy everything here. Still no. Yeah. I mean, I think for the ticket, and then you can take your two. Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's Thank you. You want this one? They're also playing the. I mean, it's not linked to the. It's not like it's not. Yeah, actually. Yeah, good. It's. And this is
Baik Bapak Ibu, kita
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we shall begin our discussion.
molor diskusinya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Peace be upon us all.
Sesi ini adalah kita diskusi tentang fokus area.
Let's focus about the focus area.
Bapak dari
The gentleman from the Iron and Steel Association is no longer with us, but we have his colleague with us. And Joseph will lead the discussion. What we expect from you is that you would like to share your input regarding the highest impact for the focus area. And we would like to hear the sharing from the development partner, which aspect that you have worked on and you may share with us, and we will avoid overlapping or duplication. Joseph, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Papati. So for this second session, as mentioned, we have a range of questions which all aim to discuss what could be the priorities for the framework to focus on. So which kind of technologies, which kind of projects would be the most instrumental to decarbonize steelmaking in Indonesia. So today is only for discussion. We will then take this into account and discuss this as well with the project steering committee. So the few questions we have are, first, which processes should the framework focus on? So the criteria can be which are the ones that are emitting the most emissions today, for instance, or which are the ones that in the future will have the potential to accompany the production growth of steelmaking in Indonesia. And this can cover the entire value chain. So it can be on iron making, steel making, can also be finishing processes as well, which consumes natural gas, but also other parts of the value chain, for instance, scrap collection, biomass use, that was also mentioned by steel associations, etc. Another question is to look if the framework should explore work on existing assets. So how to improve electric arc furnaces, blast furnaces that are already producing in the country, and or identify as well business cases for greenfield projects. A key criteria for this selection will also be on economic viability that we discussed in the previous section, saying as well that a lot of decarbonization projects struggle to reach bankability and therefore struggle to attract investments. So the purpose of the framework area is also to work on specifically these ones that would benefit the most from new policies, new regulations, or new financing instruments. And maybe a last item is to identify or to discuss if there are existing decarbonization projects in the country. So if some companies have also identified, for instance, development of hydrogen for steelmaking, development of carbon capture and storage for steelmaking or other industries. So what could be the synergies with the existing projects? So I invite you all to reflect on all these points and maybe share your views on first on which processes and which kind of assets which we could focus on.
Yes, Pak Joko.
Ya, tes. Oke, terima kasih.
Yes, thank you very much.
Pandangan saya ada dua hal berdasarkan juga diskusi tadi.
Based on the discussion, I have 2 points. The first one is the interest to use the existing asset that has been considered as a low-hanging fruit. So we will continue. Okay, many plans is BF and DRP. And from the CCUS, I'd like to engage all of you to focus our discussion, not for today, but for our next discussions. Can we prepare the framework for the carbon pricing? Which one that can be implemented for the steel industry? How the steel industry want the carbon pricing to be implemented? Is it carbon tax or carbon trading? We have cap and trade, and carbon tax is the obligation of each emitter to pay tax based on its emissions. So why I talk about the carbon price? Because without carbon pricing, there would not be CCUS. We need to find out the optimal carbon pricing that will trigger the industry to invest in the CCUS. Without it, there would not be CCUS. So the question is, how the steel industry imagine the carbon pricing, how it can be implemented. And the second point, we are heading to electrification. EAF, or the electric arc furnaces, needs to be re-optimized as the one we already have, and plus BRI. So we from area already prepare a report that will be published next month about the utilization of hydrogen in the sector and industry in ASEAN. The oil refining industry, ammonia or fertilizer, methanol, and also steel. Those 4 sectors are sectors that already utilize hydrogen in ASEAN. I'm not talking solely Indonesia, but also ASEAN. Why do we talk hydrogen merely only for power generation and transportation? So there is no utilization for them. Why don't we see industry that already apply hydrogen, even though hydrogen is generated from steam reforming or SMR? And how can hydrogen enter the steel industry? So the gentleman from Asia mentioned that the steel industry is an industry that is very sensitive to price and cost. That's why it is very challenging to mitigate the carbon in the steel sector, because a small change of price, increased price, will make it less competitive. And when we talk about the use of hydrogen, because there is already demand for hydrogen specifically in ASEAN, not only Indonesia, whereas IICA mentioned that Their intention is to use electric arc furnace and combine it with DRI. That's their ideal idea. But how to make the price to be competitive? And we need to look back. The ministerial discussion, interministerial discussion, we're talking about the cost of utilities. You compare it with low RE price. And if our RE is not affordable, we will have low carbon intensity. And we need to highlight it to the Ministry of Industry. We can offer it to the Ministry of Energy. Can you offer feed-in tariff in the RE for power generation? And please apply it in a serious policy, not only 23% target, but nothing happened because without low utility costs, we cannot make hydrogen with low hydrogen costs. So it is a feedstock, it is a material for reducing iron production. And the arc furnace, it is utilizing power. If the power is still using grid, it will have high carbon emission. So there is a certain amount for kilowatt hour, and it is very high. And we need power from RE as well. So I would like to engage with you. We understand that this is not the issue of the Ministry of Industry. This is a discussion that needs to be highlighted between different ministries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or view on the potential assets that would be instrumental? So then maybe, Joko, I have a follow-up question. So you mentioned from your intervention, we say already some potential solutions that would apply actually to three kind of assets mainly. So the electric arc furnaces, including existing fleets, direct reduction plants, which would be probably mostly new plants or revamped plants, but also carbon capture and storage, so for existing blast furnaces. So among the three, do you see one that is more difficult to implement or to develop today?
So that, yes, I mean, like CCUS is currently in a kind of pilot projects in several places in Indonesia. So it is, our national oil company, national gas company, in cooperation with BP and with other international advanced economies companies, they are currently conducting several pilot projects, and we are collecting data and feasibility. And yeah, also we are also preparing the legal framework for CCUS. I guess it will take some years. I don't know, maybe 1 decade for CCUS to be really commercialized and to be implementable in this sector. What I see, lower hanging fruit than that is EAF, electric arc furnace. How, back to how we would like to purchase, how the government would like to purchase electricity produced from renewable by IPP, by independent power provider. I think that's the key. And we should, I think this sector, industry sector, should bring up this issue up to the interministerial discussion. And I guess, I mean, for the moment, what Indonesia implement is like capping the maximum purchase price of renewable electricity from IPP. What we need is not the maximum capping, but what we need is that government pay the production cost of renewable electricity. That's what we need. I mean, that will like deblock growing up. I mean, they will grow up the renewable share. Now we are like 18%, while the target is 23% in 2 years. But we were kind of crawling from 15 years in the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe a question for I would say, everybody in the room, but also still association on EAF, because we mentioned the existing EAF that sometimes run at low capacity. And if there would be new direct reduction plants, for instance, in Indonesia or even abroad, there is the possibility to import their output and use this to feed the electric arc furnace with scrap. So the question would be, do the existing EAF improvements include already this kind of options? Or would it be preferable in the context of Indonesia to build brand new integrated direct reduction electric arc furnace plants?
Oke, terima kasih atas pertanyaannya ya.
Thank you for your question, sir. For the existing condition, it is not heading to the hydrogen or some other types of plants, but at the moment, the DRI that is being utilized is still not optimum. And I think on site, Mr. Yeri has a better knowledge regarding up to which stage is the implementation of DRI and also EAF in the iron and steel industries. And my own capacity, as far as I know, is based on Mr. Yeri's statement. I cannot add additional point regarding DRI or EAF. But what has been shared by Mr. Joko was very interesting. There were several factors that needs to be the driving force for the iron and steel industry to implement the green technology. Because without the push factor, I don't think, well, to request them to do that is very challenging. So it needs a policy, extra support from the government, so that in the future, we need to have better discussion to create win-win solution, whether it is for the industry, the government, and hopefully the products will be still competitive and can generate foreign exchange, and we can sell those steel overseas. So there are several considerations that can be discussed with the government. I think that's my answer.
Thank you very much. We also have a few participants online, and I see also one hand raised. So hopefully the question can be asked directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Widyatmini. I am. I think I speak in Indonesia is easier for me. Saya minta maaf ya nggak bisa hadir secara.
I apologize because I cannot attend this meeting in person. I won't ask a question, but allow me to share you my general insights regarding the framework. What will be the framework for the new industry and existing industry? There are a lot of questions and input. What can we do for the existing industry? How can we make improvement, and how can we generate efficiency and to achieve low-hanging and middle-hanging fruit? So we will have efficiency and to reduce so we will have efficient to achieve net zero and to reduce emission. And also, how can we do some project for the EAF? So that's one of theory for the existing industries. But my additional comment based on studies there are not so many emission reduction because it's challenging for the existing industry. There are so many problems and it is costly. Yet, based on the study, mapping, calculation on the EBITDA costs, we can see that would that be a solution to implement EAF and other technology in the existing industry. So I think it needs to be prioritized. You need to have a very detailed calculation and then you do more mapping. And then when you see about financing, if there is some financing, we can start to make the most efficient map that can be utilized. Or new technology and new plan, not for the existing industries. If I may suggest, the plan needs to be integrated, starting from steel making until crawling, so that the energy can directly be utilized. So the industry will be very efficient and it will be more competitive. And of course, it should be a large industry, well integrated with very expensive investment. But if there is financing support, there are sufficient studies. I'm certain based on studies, when it's integrated, it will be very efficient. And of course, we need to have good feasibility studies. How can we implement it? And if we already have financing support and policy support, as you mentioned that Indonesia will add extra industries in the industry or the iron and steel sector, if we already have the policy, industry, investment, we already have sufficient mapping. I think with good financing, this will be implementable. And for new energy or new plant, I think the most efficient way would be utilizing integrated plan from beginning until the end. So all of the technology varies. We can apply hydrogen or EAF, but when it's purchased, there should be a plan and everything will be built in a good integration. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the intervention.
Welcome.
So maybe a follow-up question as well. As you mentioned, integrated plants. Most of the emissions today in the iron and steel sectors come from iron making and steel making. But in integrated plants, there are also a lot of downstream processes. So the question would be, in the context of this framework and what we explained targeting decarbonisation, would you suggest to start with these most polluting steps of the value chain, or also to analyze potential substitution technologies for downstream processing? I'm thinking typically of biomass used for hot rolling mills or this kind of technologies. Thank you.
Yes, of course, as I mentioned before, that we also has to choose the very efficient technology or biomass also include, and also in renewable energy. For example, for hydrogen, for EAF, and also the downstream with renewable or the very efficient technology should be also choose for developing the integrated. It is we also develop the integrated. The integrated is already efficient because we can use the excess energy in one part to be used in other part. Then inside the integrated plant is already very efficient. But we can add also choose with the technology that also very efficient, using also biomass and also other renewable energy. Then this plant will be made very, very efficient and to support the net zero or using so many emission. That is it's very, very low carbon. I think that is, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I also have a question on the study on hydrogen use in ASEAN that you mentioned earlier, Patrico. As you have analyzed several countries, have you also identified what would be the success factors besides cheap renewable electricity in order to produce hydrogen? And typically, if we work on a business case or economic assessment of projects based on hydrogen, should it be co-located? Should it benefit from specific aspects? Should it be, on the coastline to benefit from harbor proximity or water availability, etc.? What would be the criteria to identify the right conditions to set up such a project?
Thank you. So, what Pak Heri, is that Pak Heri? Oh, from IIC, yes. Pak Heri, yes. That was correct. That I mean, like one of the challenges to produce hydrogen in Indonesia, for example, is, I mean, the DRI was aborted due to the unavailability of natural gas supply, and that is quite an important factor. So that yeah, I mean, like in the short term, we identified that the supply of natural gas to produce hydrogen to be used as feedstock, not as energy, as feedstock in the DRI process is really crucial. And I mean, if supply of natural gas is there and SMR can be built integratedly in the DRI, then it will be really helpful. And we need to start that with the basic supply of natural gas first. Then we get the kind of economic of scale that DRI will kick in again in the region. And I think we from our study we identified that as one of the aspects. And after that, we can switch to like lower carbon intensity of hydrogen, such as using combining again this SMR with CCUS, and at the end go to the low carbon intensive hydrogen. And that is one thing. But supply of natural gas is key important, because I mean, yeah, Indonesia is like producing natural gas, but it strives to meet its own domestic demand because of the long contracts that the gas producers they first need to meet up with the contracts that they have with importing countries beyond Indonesia and things like that. So again, like the basic thing is to secure the gas supply in the region first, and that needs a lot of talk.
Thank you. And maybe a follow-up question for everyone in the room. We mentioned CCUS several times, but CCUS can be applied on existing blast furnaces, for instance, but also on future DR plants, for instance, because these processes are based on coal for blast furnaces, natural gas for existing technologies of DR plants. So have there been any analysis, or based on the first projects or feasibility studies that you mentioned, is there a preferred technology where CCUS could be applied?
In the study that we do is that CCU, I mean, like, because we focus on the use of hydrogen, so that we don't really analyze the combination of CCUS with BUF and BF. So what we analyze is the use of CCUS combined with SMR to produce blue hydrogen to use as feedstock in the DRI. And we see that this blue hydrogen used in the IEAF is critical and in this process. And for that, we need to see carbon pricing really kicks in to incentivize stakeholders to invest in the CCUS.
Thank you. Maybe a question as well for
yeah. If I may just jump in on this on the CCUS or CCS. This is a technology which has been discussed and researched for the past 2-3 decades, which has shown very limited success, unfortunately. If you look at its industrial applications, maybe there's a few across the world. So the question is, are we suggesting a strategy for steel industry decarbonization that relies predominantly on blue hydrogen, CCUS combination, or should we look at other options as well? What if this technology continues to fail in the next decade or more? I'm very curious about it. I think we need to go with a portfolio of options. So what else should we look at? Okay, please.
I mean, like, yeah, this is a very challenging question. I mean, of course, we often talk about CCUS as if it is like commercially available by tomorrow, while it is not. And yeah, we still see a lot of challenge to have that in the shops. And I think based on our analysis, from the development of price based on many studies, blue hydrogen using this combination of SMR and CCUS will come like in the kind of intermediate price between gray hydrogen that we are producing now and the real green from renewable electricity. The thing is that, we see it much more feasible in our scenario, of course, but we hope that that it will really come through this kind of technology. Looking at the green hydrogen production, if we assume that, for example, we have an integrated DRI, EAF, plus the power generation from solar PV, for example, to produce 1 gigawatt installed capacity of solar PV, we will need more than 1,000 times of football field. So, yeah, the alternative is to have it like the electricity generated somewhere else, and then bring that with the transmission line to the DRI, or to produce hydrogen somewhere else and to bring that in whatever form of hydrogen. So we see that blue should come after gray. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're also conscious of the time, so we know we are reaching the end of the conversation. I will summarize a few of the items we discussed, but if there are any further views, further suggestions for us, other technologies you would recommend, please feel free to also intervene after this summary. So we have heard actually mostly about iron making and steel making, so the currently most polluting stages of the process, with 3 main technologies that we have seen. So electric arc furnaces, with a particular focus on improving the existing fleet of assets. We have heard as well on DRI, so direct reduction plants, mostly integrated projects rather than standalone. And that could be either blue or green. So maybe 2 options to be evaluated, compared, and assessed. And the third thing we have seen is CCUS. That remains a bit open. This overlaps with the blue option for DRI, but could also apply to blast furnaces in order to abate their emissions. So this is the takeaway I have from this second session. But if I forgot anything, please feel free to add a comment, and we will also investigate this in the coming month. I am also checking online if there is a hand raised. No. Yeah. So thanks a lot for the participation. And maybe before closing this meeting, I would like to also let Kemen Perin and the chairman of our steering committee provide a few concluding remarks. Thanks a lot.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak dan Ibu. Ini
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Joko, Mr. Arif, thank you. The whole room has been dominated by Mr. Joko. But our time, it is already growing late. It's pretty much late in the afternoon. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your inputs. And next, probably for the next session, the OECD team will identify your inputs, will analyze your inputs, and then when there is result, then they will report back, right? The technologies that that may be of interest, right? So, of course, interesting means also lower cost. In the name of Ministry of Trade, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to extend our utmost gratitude for your inputs. We hope that the steel industry in the future, we are actually preparing. You were asking about how's the carbon trade. That's actually our mandate. So indeed, we need to identify what kind of carbon trade that will be appropriate with this industry in the offside of the MTS. So this is actually our homework. So how to do the emission arrangement, for example. So let us work together, and we hope that next year, and Mr. Joko asked for next year. So what's the interesting pricing for carbon in the steel sector, and also the price of electricity, right? In the first presentation, we already said about the industry challenge. It doesn't mean that this is only the Ministry of Trade that is going to overcome this challenge. In the ICHAIR event in the Bidakara Hotel, they also asked this all with regards to the fertilizer industry. So that's the biggest note for us to report to the leadership so that we can build a more conducive environment. So thank you to Mr. Baker and Joseph from OECD and Mr. Harkimul. We will conclude this afternoon's meeting. Thank you. God's peace be upon you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not filled in the attendance list, can you please approach me to fill in the list? I think we have cakes. So please continue with your coffee session.